right, Balrog. How you feeling, man? It's nice to finally meet you. It would be better if we were meeting in real life, but this is the best we've got for the time being. So, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay, man. I'm fine. Surviving at the moment, which I suppose is the good thing.
Right.
Um, like most people in the UK, like looking forward to what might be a good summer, or it might never happen. No one knows.
Right. Yeah. So, what are like the perspectives like with the pandemic in the UK?
Yeah, it's been really, really bad. Um, yeah, I don't think it could have been any worse, really, for us.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of people have suffered and everything. Obviously, outside of music, obviously, health-wise, people have suffered. But there's so many areas of society that have struggled, especially like clubs, pubs, bars. So much
100%.
that becomes that's part of, I suppose, British culture has really, really suffered. So it'll be interesting to see how it all bounces back, whether it does all bounce back.
Yeah. Right. Like the cultural industry has probably suffered quite a bit. Well, I think everywhere basically, except for
Yeah,
Australia.
yeah. I think it's just because sort of particularly pub culture is so big here, and
Right.
it's such a big part of communities. That's the first thing that everyone's bothered about.
Right.
All anyone's talking about is when the pubs are open and when's the pubs going to open,
Right.
and
Right.
it tells you a lot about the British
Yeah.
relationship with alcohol, I suppose.
Yeah. 100%. Have to go and watch the footy. Um.
Yeah,
Right. So, have you guys been on complete lockdown, or what's it looked like for you?
yeah. This is our third lockdown, so we're just coming out of. Well, we're supposed to be just coming out of this next one. I think it's next week,
Mm-hmm.
where you can technically go and meet someone in a park and sit on a bench with them. That's the
Right.
first level, and then it moves forward through then. And I think it's 12th of April that beer gardens and non-essential retail opens,
Right.
and then but their big thing that everything is they're riding on is the 21st of June, which is when all the clubs are supposed to open, and it's basically back to normal,
Mm-hmm.
supposedly, or whatever was normal then.
Yeah.
Uh,
So you guys haven't been able to actually leave home, or you've had some kind of curfew or something like that, or could you still
no, not
leave
really.
and
I mean,
walk?
it's weird. Like the first time round, the first lockdown, it was very much like no one leave home, no one do anything. This time round, to be honest with you, you wouldn't even know that there was a lockdown going on.
Yeah.
Um, People are still going out doing their stuff. The only difference is that you can't go to pubs, cafes,
Right.
restaurants, most shops.
Right.
I mean, I've just started working again in what's classified as a frontline service. So
Right.
I still go to work now, and the roads are still busy. There's still people out and about. So it's nowhere near like it was in March last year when it was literally like ghost towns everywhere.
Yeah, right. No, that sounds quite similar to Berlin because here, like everything's closed down here, but people just doing normal life, just doing whatever. But yeah, as I said, like restaurants and just cultural stuff like clubs and stuff like that, everything's closed. So,
Yeah.
why don't we start getting into the music? So, can you tell me what the lockdown's been like for you, artistically, and yeah, because I've seen you've done quite a few, you've had quite a few releases, in 2020 on various
Yeah.
artists various artists labels, and also three of your own. So, would you mind taking us a little bit through that? And how the pandemic has affected your workflow.
Yeah. I don't know. It's in some ways it's been good, and in some ways it's bad. I mean, it's given me a lot of time to just purely focus on music and get a lot done. And I think that's the same for a lot of artists, particularly artists who were doing a lot of touring before. I mean, I wasn't in that situation, but I've always devoted a lot of time to it because it's it's a hobby that's also become a almost like a full-time job now.
Mm-hmm.
So the time has been a massive thing. Yeah, and I just took the decision. I could have even not released anything or carried on releasing stuff, and I felt that the worst thing to do is, it's for everything to just shut down and black out, and there's no music coming out, no enjoyment. So people wanted to hear my music. I had stuff already lined up, a lot of quite big releases that I didn't really want to postpone. But then there is stuff that I have postponed. So I've just been sort of weighing up what I wanted to come out and what I didn't want to come out, because there's stuff where it's not necessarily catered specifically to the dance floor, but there is stuff which I would be really gutted if they never got played in clubs. So that's how I sort of determined what came out. But then there's also, like, I did an EP with COUP, which got a lot of plays by Rebekah and stuff. And so the tracks had already sort of done the rounds and they've already been played in really big clubs. And so I didn't feel like holding on to them. There was much point. So I just went forward with the release, and I was happy to do that. And I was happy with how it turned out. And again, it's different, like people are tuning into live streams. People are actually probably taking note of music a lot more than they would in a club. If you hear something in a club, you might hear it for 5 minutes and then you'll never hear it again, or unless you've got a video of it or something. But now people are watching live streams, and then they're watching them over and over again. They're listening to music over and over again. So for me, I think it's been as good as it could have been. It's been productive, and then I've got a lot of exposure for it. So it's not been all bad for me at all.
Right, so I wasn't able to see in which labels you'd released these last three projects you released: Neo Rave, Rebellion, PD 031, and the Darkness EP. So you said you just mentioned you released on COUP project. So could you break down on which labels you released these projects?
Who I've released with already?
Yeah,
a lot.
No. I mean these last projects from 2020. The last three that I mentioned.
Oh right, so there was COUP who I released that with, and then also the Darkness one, the Darkness EP was with Gobsmacked,
right?
Who are originally an Irish label, and then they're now in Berlin, and they do a lot of parties in Berlin. They used to do it at Griezmill,
right?
And so I released with them when I was first starting out, and that was one of my biggest EPs that I released with them. That original one got a lot of support, so I did this one, but it was music that I'd made quite a long time ago, and I've been sitting on, because when I first gave them it, I gave them both EPs at once, and they said, we'll release this one, I think it was 2019, and then this one 2020. And so when by 2020 came out, artistically and from a critical point of view, I wasn't that happy with them at that time, but it was already locked in and it went out anyway. I mean, I still like them and they still did okay, but I think that's the thing, is that you progress so quickly. I progress so quickly.
Right.
I listen to a lot of my own music now, and I'm just not happy with it at all. And I think, talking to people, it's quite a common occurrence. You develop so much that your old stuff, it doesn't have the same presence that it does now, because you've got so many new techniques and you get better at mixing down and sound design and stuff like that. So
right. So
and then
are you trying to to appeal to a certain audience, or to get to do a certain sound with what you were saying, not being happy with your previous, or some of your previous music, like nowadays, like what are you trying to have a very specific sound that you're aiming towards?
I think, in a sense, yeah. I mean, it's always been about sort of an industrial hard feel, but also I like to maintain that there's a lot of groove in it. And I like you to be able. I'd like people to be able to dance to it. Now, I wouldn't want to put music out which isn't danceable to. I think it's it's dance music at the end of the day, and for me, I'm not that interested in making music that is, like too challenging to the listener, or like creating like weird, like mental soundscapes.
Yep.
It always usually comes down to a kick drum, a hi-hat, and a snare at the end of the day. But
Mm.
it's what you put on. That's, for me, is the most important thing. So yeah, I just consistently like to keep the groove in it. I mean, and I think I have developed my own sort of style and sound, and people certainly seem to pick that up. But as you person making music, it's difficult for you to understand that until people start giving you feedback on that. You don't really have that understanding of what your sound is, really. I don't think.
100%. 100%. Right. Sorry, I interrupted you. If you want to keep on going with the releases.
Honestly, I have so many releases I can't even remember. It's a bit ridiculous, really.
Yeah. No, no
I
worries.
did.
Like I've seen, like I've noted some down here. I checked out back in July or something when it was released, this House 22 various artists release with Fraction,
Yeah,
Ahan and Fabrizio De Santis. Industrial Tribalism, isn't it? That's
yeah,
that was actually my favorite song from the EP, and I think the first song I ever heard from you.
yeah,
And then I've also listened to this to your isn't this what's it called? Lift My Hands, your most heard song on Beatport or in general
yeah,
on
yeah.
this Meaning of Rave.
That's the meaning of rave. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, right. Yeah, you've got Luca Eck. He's a very talented young producer from Berlin as well. Um, so how do you like how do you get on these VAs? Like, do you approach the labels? Do the labels approach you? Do you send out demos, or do you do it through management? How does the process look like?
Well, I mean, I do everything myself. I don't have any management or any agent or anything, so I do everything myself. Um, with the House 22 one, the guys from House 22 I know from Manchester because I went to university in Manchester, and they run events in Manchester, and they've just recently moved into sort of label territory.
Right.
And I have some connections with them, and they approached me because they were putting together the VA. I sent some tunes over, and then they picked up the Industrial Tribalism one, but I made that probably very, very early on.
Right.
And I just sort of, what I'll do is I'll often send demos out, and then if a label picks them up, I'll then go back to the track and then can do some more work on it. So at
Right.
least it keeps it reasonably fresh. I wouldn't just send something as it went to the label. I'll always look at it because there's always tweaks and stuff you can make. So that was the case with that, and yeah, it did quite well, yeah, and got a lot of decent bit of exposure. And then with the Lift My Hands one, I can't really remember. I think I probably made it, and then the Meaning of Rave, their first VA, I thought was really, really, really good and solid. They had like Diane on it. I think they maybe had Blix on it.
Hmm.
And then Veronique, who runs the label, she did a track on it. And it was just a really solid VA, and I like the style of it. That's sort of like hard, but also like rave orientated sound.
Hmm.
And so I made that track, and then I sent that to them. And again, yeah, that's been one of the best picked up ones. Majorly because I think Clara Couve, I don't know how you say it, Clara Couve, she played it in her hall. And that got a lot of exposure, and then she charted it on Beatport. And so I would think that's probably why it's done so well on Beatport.
Oh, for like the Lift My Hands one, Lift My
Yeah,
Hands
and
song.
then I've also just done Watch This Beat with them on
Yep.
the newest one, and that was played by Perk, which was really, really big for me.
Wow.
Because again, like in this period, a lot of massive, massive artists who wouldn't usually be doing podcasts and stuff
Yep.
are doing those. So like Manni Dee did one where he played one of my tracks. Perk did one where he played one of my tracks. So people who are there, they need to do these podcasts and they're searching for new music. Whereas if they were just touring and doing gigs, they might be more inclined to play the same stuff that they know works in the club.
Right.
So I think in that sense, it's good at the moment for young producers, because big artists need to be doing these mixes and podcasts to stay relevant, but they need new music.
Yep.
So I think that's one of the benefits of the period that we're going through.
Yeah, 100%. Like it also has to have its benefits, right? This lockdown, and it's good to have these platforms that offer, you know, younger producers exposure, like yourself. So have you had any moment where, you know, what was the moment for you when you were like, wow, like I can't believe, you know, Rebekah played my track, or something like that?
Well, yeah, that was exactly it. I was, I think probably maybe the end of 2018, start of 2019. I've been producing for like 2 years. I'd had some releases, but I hadn't been happy with how I'd interacted with labels. I'd had a lot of issues with labels, and I was just feeling a bit down about it all, and not thinking there was much point in carrying on with it, really. And then it
Right.
was literally on the same day I was feeling that, I was just scrolling through Instagram and came across this video of Rebekah at Green Love Festival and tapped on. And then I was like, no, like, I was just like, couldn't believe it. I was like, that's my tune, which was
Far out.
High Volume Funk, which is off the COUP EP. I
Far
just
out.
couldn't believe it. It was just absolutely mental, because it was just a huge crowd. Like, it was like in the thousands, and yeah, mad. And then she played it maybe 5 or 6 times on different occasions throughout that tour she was doing.
Right.
And then I went and saw her play in Manchester, and she played it in Manchester while I was like stood next to her in the booth.
Oh, for real.
Yeah. It's
Right.
crazy.
So you guys like actually linked after that?
Only because she was playing in Manchester and she'd been playing a lot of my stuff, and I messaged her and said, you know, I was going to come and see you anyway. So she put me on a list, and I went in, and she was doing like a 4 or 5 hour set, and so I was in there most of the night, like in the booth, and yeah, she played like 5 or 6 of my tracks while I was in there. It was just crazy to get it
Wow.
from that, like, both perspectives as well, because I had it from the perspective of being behind the decks, and then I also went out into the crowd, and yeah, it was mental.
Far out. Congrats for that, man. 100%. That's a pretty
Cheers.
good achievement. 100%. Right. So let's move on to you know. Well, you first of all, you mentioned that you've had issues with labels. Loads of people I've talked to that have also founded their own labels told me that, you know, that they not really fucking with the slow releases, and the labels changing up their tracks and stuff like that. So can you tell me, you know, what was the motivation behind founding Khazad Records, if I'm pronouncing that
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's
And
right. Yeah.
yeah, and like what's the sound you're aiming for with the label?
The original motivation was when I was first starting and I had these issues with labels, basically labels taking tracks and then putting them out, doing everything, and then, you know, getting absolutely nothing back from them. And, you know, tracks that I know have been downloaded and played and people have bought. And I'm not saying that, you know, I'm owed a lot of money for that, but at the start there was never any sort of communication of, you know, you've given us this piece of what is art, like this music, this art form, we've taken it, we've used it for commercial gain, but then there's nothing that comes back to the artist.
Right.
And consistently on my first release, which was Special K, this label were taking it and using it and then recharting it themselves, and then also re-releasing it under different label brands. So
Mhm.
they were just rebranding their label, then re-releasing it, and constantly using this same song that I had produced, and I never got anything out of it. Tried to communicate with them, tried to get it taken down, had nothing. And then I'd also sort of sent them some other demos of a track called Tribal Values, which I actually released on a label called Arcane from Ireland. And they had released, one of the guys from Arcane messaged me and he said, how come you've already released this track? And I said, I haven't. And they had already taken the demo I had sent them just to see if they were interested, not giving them confirmation that they could release it. And they had released it under a different name, under a different artist.
What the fuck?
So
So they
like,
basically stole your track.
yeah. And
Right.
I was fuming about it, and luckily the guys from Arcane, they're quite experienced, and they went out and they put a cease and desist on them, and they took it down, and so it was fine in the end. And then I released it with them, but it really sort of knocked my confidence in the whole thing, really, because I was like a young, unexperienced artist, and I feel like they took advantage of the fact that I was eager to get releases. And, they're not the only people. Like Industrial Techno United have got a very, very, very bad reputation for doing exactly the same thing.
Right.
I know a lot of artists who've released with them because they see it as a platform to boost off, and they get a lot of success with a release, but get absolutely nothing back, or they have music stolen and stuff. And so it's as a young artist going out, you need it's those sorts of experience and knowledge that you need to know about, because people will just try and take advantage of you and take your music, really. So
100%. What was this first label?
it was called Hardline, and
Hardline.
then it changed its name, and it's called Dark something now. But I'd forgotten all about it, really. And then last month I was listening back to the track, and I thought that I decided to release it myself on the Bandcamp as well. And I wrote about the issues I'd had with it, and it's been really well received so far, and I've updated it and stuff. So at least I feel like I've moved past that, and I've put my own better version out of it now. So people want to get the old version, they can, but there's a newer version where the money's or the credit's coming directly to me. I don't want to sound like it's all about the money, but as an artist, you put so much into what you create. You don't want to feel like you're being ripped off at all.
100%. No, 100%.
So, like, to go a long way around it, that was the motivation for starting the label, which was initially just about me releasing my music. And then when I started to work with a lot more established labels, I realised that they weren't all scumbags. So it wasn't so much a thing for me, but I was getting sent a lot of music on promo, and just indirectly by people who were usually young. It was the first or second release, predominantly from the UK, and I just thought that there was a lack in the UK of a sort of low level label which people can get into easily, because I think probably because the scene's been so established in the UK, is that what's dominant now is a lot of very, very big labels, and it's very, very difficult to get on them to even get your music listened to. So I wanted to create something which was quite easy to get, not necessarily just a release, but also to get feedback from. Like I will answer every email that we get sent of tracks and give my feedback and say it doesn't work for whatever reason. Come back in a few months and send something new. And the theme has always just been industrial techno, but with a solid groove in it. Everything that goes on a label is something I would play in a set, and that's purely how I determine what goes on.
Right. So will you also check like the artist's background, if he's got, his social medias, on point and stuff like that, or will you just, focus on the music?
I'll have a look, but it really doesn't matter to me.
Right.
I mean, I can see why it's a help, like, if they've already got 1,000 followers on Facebook or anything, but I really don't see the need, because, like, there's people who are on there, like, the first EP we did, the second EP we did was with Bear, and he's good friends with the 8 guys who are from Liverpool and North Wales, and they've just released on SNTS. They're well in with SNTS.
Right.
But he's such a good producer, like ridiculously good, far better than I am, in my opinion. But he just doesn't put himself out there. He doesn't have any social media present. He didn't even have a Facebook page, and that Facebook artist page when I took him on the label. So, you know, I knew that the music was amazing and people needed to hear the music, and I played the music so much and people have asked about it,
Right.
that I just wanted to take him on. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's up to him if he wants to push that. I can't force him to push his social media presence. I mean, I think it's a waste because he could be huge if he wanted to be. But, you know, some people are moving a different pace. Like for me, my whole life revolves around this now, but other people are still, you know,
Yeah.
they're in more work which dictates a life a lot more, or
Yeah.
they're at uni or whatever. You know, a lot of people can't commit fully to it, but if he wants to, he could massively do well. But that's his choice. Yeah.
You know, 100%. Like that's basically the shame right nowadays, that if your online presence doesn't really correspond to your music, or at least, you know, try to push that a little bit, you basically don't have a platform for people to hear your music. So it's pretty impossible, you know, unless you push
Yeah,
that shit.
but I think that was something that I mean, I've always pushed the social media thing because I just see it as a tool that I can use to get more exposure and get more people listening.
Yeah.
But if you, like for him, putting his music out, you know, the exposure will build slowly, but it's up to him whether he will capitalize on it. Um, I mean, it's the same with a lot. There's a few people who are releasing or will be released on a label who've got very small um, social media followings and stuff,
Oh
but the
yeah.
music is amazing. So, you know, as long I'm happy to put the music out, like it suits me.
Yep.
So, but it'll be up to them to take the next step. Like the label can only go so far, I think.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. Like if the music isn't there, well, that's no good for any label. I interviewed this artist that's released on Soma Records, Giordano, this Italian dude from, well, he actually lives in Berlin, and his online presence isn't massive or anything like that, but he's got a very special sound and a very, you know, distinctive kind of style. And they picked up on it and decided to release, you know, I don't know how many EPs is released on Summer, but I think like two or three. So
Yeah, yeah.
obviously, but you've got to have, you know, that's the thing nowadays. Like you've basically got to have both. You know what I'm saying? Like if you only have,
Yeah, I think especially because there isn't, especially, well, certainly in the UK, there isn't the capacity to go out and get regular gigs. Whereas originally during the early 2000s, like late 90s, obviously social media didn't exist. So the only way you got exposure is by going out and playing and
right,
um, you know, smashing it in a club, and then people will be talking about you or whatever. But there isn't that there isn't those opportunities for that sort of exposure now. I don't think, because there aren't that amount of regular techno nights, particularly in the UK, for you to play at, and especially like in the north of the UK. Like maybe if you're in London, you know, you could go out and you could play a lot of gigs, and you would start to get recognition. But again, it's the same reason that it's quite uncommon now to find people who are purely DJs and they're not producers, because being a DJ will only get you so much exposure, whereas being a producer, it gives you the ability to spread out a lot wider, I think, and get a lot more influence. It's
right.
just purely by people associate your name with a certain type of music. So
You know,
there's
that's
only like very few people. Like you think about people like, I don't know, maybe like, I don't know. It's difficult to even think of someone who is a DJ who isn't a producer now. Like Steph Troxler and Ricardo Villalobos, they do produce, but quite rarely. I suppose they're the only people I could really think of. Ben UFO or someone like that, maybe.
Yeah, I was actually talking to this girl called Lucine. I think I'm pronouncing that wrong, but doesn't matter. She's a part of the Vox Nox crew, if you know them,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
from Berlin, and we were we were talking about the same thing, that it's basically there's a tendency towards DJs to start producing, just because if you don't produce, there's going to be basically like a limit to what you can to your potential as an artist, basically.
yeah. I think that if you're going to DJ and not produce, then you have to be the best, and you have to be, yeah, as an absolutely like standout DJ, um, to not be not need that further exposure. But yeah, there's a few who do it, but most of them have at some point dabbled in production, like Carl Cox. I mean, he very rarely does any sort of production, but obviously, you know, easily one of the best DJs in the world, or probably is the best, certainly techno DJ in the world.
Yep.
And did it, you know, during the 90s and 2000s, did everything. DJ, you know, like 3-4 deck vinyl mixing and stuff. And I think it's definitely more of a thing now. I don't think back in the day it was such an issue. I think one of the problems is that now it's how you get into it. I mean, my first love will always be DJing. I mean, I love DJing far more than I love producing. And the reason I started producing was purely to try and gain some more exposure, because, you know, putting out mixes on your own SoundCloud channel will only get you so far.
Right.
Putting the tracks out got me more exposure and gave me more opportunities to play more. And, you know, it's always been a goal of mine to play more gigs. That's what I want to do. That's what I enjoy doing most. But I've had to build that sort of base underneath me. But it's also, again, you know, I would never have thought 3 years down the line that I could play a whole set just using my own production. But I'm probably at that position where I could now, even though I wouldn't want to, because I like playing other people's music and I don't like listening to my music too much.
Oh, for real? How comes?
Well, it depends. Like, even though you know it's good and you know it's been tried and tested, there's still a little part of you which worries, oh, you know, is this actually going to work? Is people going to hate it, or is the kit going to be loud enough? And I'd always, if I'm playing something, I'm always listening. I'm always hearing something. It's, oh, why didn't I tweak that, or why didn't I change that? So I think it's more just because of my own issues and insecurities and anxiety around the whole thing.
I was gonna say it's probably like listening to yourself, like when you send a voice message or something like that, to listen to your own voice, where you're like you can't even recognize your own voice.
Yeah, I hate voice messages. I cannot understand why people put themselves through it. I just can't get my head around it.
Right. Okay, so moving on, I've noticed your music is very dance oriented, obviously. So what has like I've talked to some artists that have told me that obviously COVID's been shit, but it's made them you know, push their boundaries a little bit artistically. So is this been the case for you as well, you know, regarding the fact that people aren't really going to listen to your music necessarily now during lockdown to rave, or have you, you know, stayed consistent with your old sound?
I don't think it's really changed my sound particularly. I've had the time to sort of look at new things, try new things out. Maybe, I mean, something that I'm doing a lot more of is integrating different genres into techno and putting a techno spin on different stuff. So I love like disco and soul and Motown and stuff, and I've been working a lot at trying to bring those sorts of vocals and also drum breaks and sometimes sort of like the harmonics from those sorts of tracks into like a techno drive and a techno groove. I mean, that's something maybe that I've sort of been experimenting with, but they're still what I would expect people to be played on in clubs and for people to dance to. So no, that hasn't changed for me really, because I've always seen that, you know, it's not going to be like this forever. It's going to get back to normal at some point. So I don't see the point in changing my sound. All I've done, I've probably just refined my sound a bit more, just because I've had more time to do it really.
Yeah, no, I didn't necessarily mean changing it, but just like experimenting or doing some weirder shit, or something that you wouldn't have done, you know, maybe.
No, I mean, originally that like this year for me was going to be all about buying hardware and getting to grips with hardware.
Right.
But right at the start of the pandemic, I was put on furlough, so I didn't have that much money come in, and then I was made redundant, and then I was unemployed for like 4 or 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm back in work, but I'm only back in work part-time, so I've had to prioritize just living over spending ridiculous amounts of money on hardware and stuff. That's something that I've not been able to move into. But hopefully in the future I'll be able to afford it, but it is what it is. Like you can't have everything. I think there's a lot of, it's almost like this new weird in sort of Instagram and Facebook shaming of this is how much gear and this is how many simps I've got and this is how many modular things I've got. And it's just become this idea where the more gear you have, the better you are. But you know, you can have all the gear in the world, but if you can't make anything out of it, then what's the point, really?
100%. Yeah, no, 100%. Like you have to be resourceful, man. You know what I'm saying? If the talent's there, if the music's there. I also know, well, this Spanish DJ called Vendex. I don't know if you've heard of him. He looks
I've
like,
just signed an EP from him. Yeah.
oh, for real, right?
Yeah.
He's actually kind of a mate of mine, but he doesn't use any hardware at all.
Yeah.
So I mean, at the end of the day, it depends on you, you know, and on how resourceful you are, and what you do with what you have. But you know, talk about hardware. Like, what's your gear? What gear do you use for typically to produce?
Like 90% of it is all done in Ableton in the box. I've got a
Right.
Cyclone TB03 that I use for sort of acid stuff,
Right.
and I've got some keys, and I've got some old ass drum machine that I was given when I was like 16 by one of my cousins.
Right.
that I occasionally use, but you know, 90% of my production is done digitally in Ableton. But
Right.
that's just how I've done it. I've just taught myself how to do it. And at the moment, I don't see the point in changing a good thing while it's working well. You know, I'm moving on to bigger labels, bigger exposure, and the biggest boost you can get is, you know, if someone is able to take something that you've made on your laptop and play it in front of 5,000 people and it still holds up, then you know, nothing too drastic needs to change really. The only thing for me is that, you know, I'm getting towards the state where I'm getting a little bit bored with it all. And so I think what I'd like to do is move into like modular synthesis and give all that sort of stuff a go, just creating like weird sounds and just to add more like depth to all the tracks. And that's the route I'd probably like to move down, but you know, it's an expensive route.
Yeah, man. But 100%, like if it works, it works. You know what I'm saying? So congrats on that, for real. So you also mentioned to me that you're releasing on Soma, did you, on Instagram?
Yes, but it's sort of, I shouldn't really be announcing it yet. I found out yesterday.
All right. Okay, so we should edit this out maybe, or?
Well, it's okay. I mean, it's good. Yeah, I am at some point. Yeah,
right.
Leave it at that.
Okay.
So there's going to be two. There's going to be two. One soon and one later on in the year. But
all right.
That's what I can really say about it. Yeah.
Cool. Looking.
I mean, I don't really understand all, like, I do and I don't understand the thing about, you know, not announcing releases early.
Yeah.
I understand that, you know, you want to create hype about it like closer to the time, but whatever.
It's the secrecy, man. The secrecy. No. Okay. Looking forward to hearing that, man. 100%. All right. So, moving on. Like, I think it's pretty obvious, but can you tell us a little bit about how you chose the name and what you know about you know, what role the Lord of the Rings has played in your.
Yeah, I'm just a massive nerd, really. I suppose I just absolutely love it. It's just in my opinion, the best piece of movies, cinematography that's ever been done in the history of mankind, and yeah, I love it. Watched them all hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, and yeah.
So the extended versions as well.
Oh yeah. Don't watch the peasant shit.
Yeah, right. What do you think about this new series coming out on Amazon? This new Lord of the Rings series.
It's worrying, very, very worrying.
How
It
comes?
could be, it could be amazing. I think if you ask any like proper Lord of the Rings fan, it's like very cautious about knowing how it will all turn out because I mean, you know, if you look at something like The Mandalorian, although I enjoyed it in parts, like the nostalgia of it all and like, you know, finding new places, new planets and stuff. You know, there's a lot of like cheesy shit in it, and I mean, the Hobbits were just a joke. Like, I absolutely hated
100%,
all of them.
yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. Cautious optimism, I suppose.
Right, right. You can't go wrong with that.
But
Um,
I mean, I saw that there's a new poster come out for it
yeah,
yesterday or the day before yesterday,
yeah.
and it's called like The One Ring. And I thought the whole point of it was that they weren't trying to focus on that part of the universe and that they were going to do it much earlier on so it didn't clash at all. So
Right.
again, that's another worry about how it might be a bit shit. And also, I've seen Amazon are doing it, so
Yeah. You know, I also thought that they were focusing more on the Silmarillion and
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
Elven world or whatever. I'm kind of a Lord of the Rings fan. I'm probably not as crazy as you about it, but but yeah, okay, nice man.
But
So
yeah, so that's where obviously where the name comes from. But a lot, it's interesting that some people also relate it to Street Fighter
oh right,
because one of the characters in Street Fighter is called Balrog.
okay.
No, it's Lord of the Rings for.
It was obvious to me, and when I browsed on your SoundCloud profile, just saw the nice old Balrog.
Yeah.
It was obvious. It was kind of obvious, right? Okay, so do you mind telling us a little bit about how you started out and what the techno scene looks like? You're from Leeds, right? Well,
Well, I grew up
Yorkshire
just outside
Dales.
Leeds, but I live in Leeds now. I live in Leeds now. Yeah.
Right, right. So could you tell us a little bit about, how you started out, what the techno scene, what the atmosphere was looking like what looked like when you were growing up with techno and how you first started getting into this music.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was never really growing up that into it. I first started out. Yeah, I've always had a strong interest in music. I used to play instruments as a child, like piano and drums and stuff, and had a lot of music influences at home, like rock, soul, disco, but mainly like heavy metal. I was really, really into heavy metal when I was a kid. Used to go to lots of gigs and festivals and stuff. And then when I went to secondary school, started listening to a lot of drum and drum and bass was coming through in terms of like people like Chase and Status and Prodigy were releasing a lot of albums at that time, and yeah, so that was really where it all started. And then I went to my first sort of big rave when I was 17, which was at a night called Jungle Jam in Leeds. So that was pure jungle drum and bass. Yeah, and it was pretty life changing to say the least. We saw Goldie play, and then Dillinger as well, which is really, really intense drum and bass. And he also brought his own sound system with him called the Valve sound system. And this sound system was so loud that they had to give out earplugs on entry because it was just the most ridiculous thing. So that was my first ever night out.
Your
And
first ever
then
night out in general, like you hadn't been
I'd been to
partying.
like, you know, like shitty clubs, like where I lived, like in a little town and stuff. And I used to go to Leeds Festival, which is the big festival up north. They do Leeds and Reading, two massive
Right,
festivals. And I used to go there with my dad because it used to be kids getting in for free up until the age of 12, I think it was. So I
right,
used to go with my dad to that every year for like 4 or 5 years. But my
right,
first like, you know, proper night out getting fucked was in in Jungle Jam in Leeds, and then we used
right.
to go there pretty much every other week or something throughout school. And then when I went to uni, it was all about deep house and minimal techno.
Yep.
Um, got very into like Taylor Buzz, Maceoplex,
Right.
Matador, like all those like Enter with Richie Horton and stuff. And then through stuff like that, found more techno, started listening to people like Julian Jewell, Fabio Florido, and then found people like Chris Liebing. And then when I was in my second year at uni, they did an Awakenings night in Manchester, which I think is probably the first and last time they've done a big Awakenings event outside of Holland. I think, I'm not sure. They took over Victoria Warehouse, which is this huge, huge warehouse near Old Trafford in Manchester.
Right.
And I went there, and I was doing a lot of club promoting at that point, and so managed to get like VIP tickets somehow. So we went behind the decks, and I watched Chris Liebing and Dave Clark for about a meter away, and
Wow.
yeah, since I was hooked after that. And then went to Awakenings the following year, saw Dax play at the Awakenings Festival, and that was like the turning point for me. I said, like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to DJ. This is what I want to produce.
Right.
And yeah, no look back since, really.
Right. So, like, what years was this?
So, oh god, I left school in 2013. So 2015 is probably when I was going to that Awakenings thing in Manchester. And then I think it was 2016 when we went to Awakenings. And then we went in 2017 as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you're going to all these festivals and discovering this new music. You're in the booth with Chris Liebing. You know you go, you're
I
going
would
to.
say I was in the booth with him. I was sort of stood behind a speaker, sort of watching him,
Right.
hoping that no one saw I didn't have a proper wristband or something.
Right. Doesn't matter. Good enough for me, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, so how, like, what was the step, to starting to produce and to starting to actually, create a name for yourself?
I mean, I've been, DJing for a fair while, to be fair, like just sort of on shitty, all in one unit, so like on my laptop and stuff. And you've really just used to enjoy that. Did a lot of drum and bass, and a lot of house, like Chicago house is the other thing that I really, really enjoy and spend a lot of time listening to and DJing as well. Like I do a lot of more relaxed, what I would say chilled stuff on the side as like a different sort of alias, playing at bars and stuff. So that's always been where I started out. And then in 2018, I went to Belgium to do some work on an internship, and we had a lot of free time. And I'd already previously downloaded Ableton, had a go at it, couldn't get my head around it, so just left it. And then I had all this free time, so I just decided to give it another go. Watched loads of tutorials on YouTube and stuff, and then just started getting more and more into it. And yeah, it was more probably just boredom that pushed me towards it. But then I suddenly realised that I enjoyed doing it, and yeah, I mean, I suppose it almost became, like as you would go and sit on a PlayStation or an Xbox or something. For me, I was just going to sit on my laptop and play around for a few hours. That's how it all started.
Right. That's a better hobby for sure, man.
Yeah.
Right.
So then, and so you said about making a name. I really don't know how that happened. Really, I just decided to come up with the alias, obviously influenced by Lord of the Rings and stuff, and then started putting out mixes, and then started putting out tracks, and then, as you were saying earlier about the labels picking them up very early.
Yep.
I was sort of like, holy shit, like, why am I being picked up by these labels so quickly?
Right.
But just rolled with it, and then
Right.
that was it. And then it just went on from there. It just carried on developing as a producer, and then putting them out to bigger labels and seeing if bigger labels are interested.
Yeah.
I've always
100%.
found it easier to send music to DJs though, and to see if the DJs like it. And then if the DJs like it, then I'll think about how I'm going to release it. Usually.
Right. So how would that work? Like, you send, your tracks, your unreleased tracks, to a certain DJ, Clara
Yeah, I
Khazad
do it
or
all the
something?
time still. Like,
Right.
I I like to share the music. You know, if I've made it, I don't see the point in sitting on it for
Yeah.
months and months while I'm trying to find a label. I'd rather give it to people,
Yeah.
see people play it out, see how it works. You know, I did it yesterday. I sent a couple of new tracks out yesterday to a couple of people, and they picked them up, and then
So is
a
that
couple of
how
them
like
were there.
like Rebekah, for instance, is that how that came about, or
Yeah,
with
just
her?
purely through SoundCloud. Send me a message on SoundCloud. SoundCloud is the biggest tool for a producer you can use, 100%.
Yeah,
Better than Facebook, Instagram, anything like that. That's
100%.
one bit of advice I would give someone is use SoundCloud. I mean, that's what's so mental is that it's, as a website, it's so shit. Like, there's so little, like, there's just so many little things which are so poor about it, and
Yeah.
they could make it so good. Like, they're still, you can't access the messenger on a phone. Why have they not
Oh,
made
for
made
real?
it
Oh,
better?
okay.
I just don't understand it, and it's always been like that. They've only just been able to access your stats and stuff on your phone. That's just a very, very new thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, they could make it into such a massive portal for exchanging music and stuff, and I think they are slowly getting there. But it seems crazy to me that it's taken them so long to sort of get into it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's basically like the new MySpace, right? Like the new
Yeah,
platform that people have to. Well, now it's restricted, but back in the I don't know, like I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, I think that you didn't even have to pay. Like you had unlimited uploading
yeah.
capabilities, right? So do you think your musical background? Like what instruments did you play?
I played piano, like jazz piano, a bit of
Right.
classical and then jazz piano. Um, and then I moved on to drums. I played drums
Right. So do
throughout
you think
school
this?
until I went to uni.
Right. So do you think this helped you, to develop an interest also for starting to produce and helped you technically, to learn to produce and stuff like that?
I think so, yeah, because I did music at school as a subject, and we did very basic music production using like Fruity Loops and stuff like that.
Right.
So I suppose that was my first sort of like foray into it all. I think it helps in terms of the actual production in just having an ear for it and what sounds good.
Right.
I mean, I'm nowhere near how I used. My ability to play piano is nowhere near how it used to be. Like, I can barely even play most music now just because I don't practice at all.
Right.
But I can still run through the chords, and I know what sounds good, and I try and bring a lot of that into my production. And on the drum side, I suppose, it just gives you an idea of what works rhythmically, and just bringing little bits into your production that maybe someone who isn't musically trained might not think of.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I would not say it's the huge part of my music, which dictates everything, because I'm classically trained. Like, I would barely even say I'm classically trained.
Yeah.
I've just got a lot of experience in music, and I know what sounds good, and I think that's a big part of it.
Right. Yeah. No. No. Like in my experience, most producers, most artists that I've interviewed, maybe haven't been exceptionally trained or anything like that, but they have had some kind of musical feeling, whether whether it was listening to a lot of music and just like knowing a lot about music, or whether it is playing a certain instrument or something like that.
Yeah, I think the main thing for me is that I can listen to something that I like the sound of, and I can recreate it. I think that's the big thing for me, is having the ability to recreate something that I've heard to. So I listen to it. If you were to say what do you listen to a lot now? I don't listen to that much new. When I'm not listening to promos or stuff for the label or stuff I'm going to use in mixes, I don't, on a casual basis, listen to that much new techno. But I
Right.
listen to a lot of old school mixes
Right.
from people like in the early 2000s. Like, that's what really, really, like, I really enjoy listening to, and I enjoy listening to their productions and taking things like that. And so I'll be listening to something like in the car or while I'm in the gym or something, and I'll be thinking, oh, I like that, it sounds cool, that, and then when I get home, I'll try and recreate something like that. And I think
Right.
the ability to try and do that is good. Or if you want to take something from like a chord sequence from I don't know, whatever, like a disco track or something, like recreate
Yep.
something along that line. I think if you've got an ear for it,
Yep.
it's a lot easier in that respect.
Exactly. Moving forward, so how? Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about the Leeds and in general the UK techno scene? You know, the clubs
Yeah.
and yeah, like what kind of sound you guys is most appealing for you guys, and you know what the raves look like. I've been to the UK, but I've never been partying or anything like that. So yeah, just to give us
Yeah.
like a nice little breakdown of the concept.
I don't know where to start. If you want to start north downwards, you know, I would say in terms of techno, you know, in somewhere like Leeds, you know, it's so dead. There's almost nothing,
Right.
which is not how it used to be. There used to be a huge techno scene here in the early 2000s, well, like late 90s, early 2000s. There's a huge techno scene here, like really like booming, like as far as like it was outside of Leeds, just in like little towns around Leeds, hosting like massive techno parties. And then for some reason, it's just all died out really. It's very much all about minimal house, like Romanian house. Drum and bass is still huge in Leeds. I would say you could say that Leeds is either on a night for like a raving night out or the underground night out. It's going to be either drum and bass or minimal house, or also like Chicago house, funky house. So that's what's still in Leeds. I mean, Manchester's a bit different. Manchester's got quite a thriving techno scene at the moment. People like House 22, who we were talking about earlier, putting on a lot of big events, bringing a lot of big people over. And then, yeah, moving further down. I mean, London, you know, I've never been out in London that much. I went to Printworks once, which was absolutely mental. It was a Clockworks night. Um, and yeah, I think it's probably the closest I'll ever get to Berghain because it was crazy. Like it's not what you would expect from a UK night at all. Like just the
Right.
people and yeah, it was mental.
Like in what sense? Like how?
Just like a lot of like intense German clothing, a lot of leather,
Right. Right.
um,
Like
cybergoths.
possession style.
Not even like that. Like just proper like like bondage,
Right.
Berghain, sex
Like
parties
fetish.
type
Yeah.
stuff.
Right.
But it was. I mean, I was talking to someone that while I was there, and they were saying, and they said to me, "This is the closest you'll get to Berghain outside of Germany." And it was purely because Ben Clock was playing. It was a Clockworks night. It was actually Dax was meant to be playing there, and which is why I was going. But it was because he'd had all that stuff when he was in Morocco. He played the Call to Prayer, and he was sort of had this charge against him. So they had to cancel all his gigs, and so he didn't
Who was
play in
that?
the end.
Ben
Dax
Clark.
J.
Oh, oh
Dax
yeah.
J.
He had a charge against him in Morocco.
Yeah, I don't know if it was Morocco or it was like a North African country, and one of the tracks he played had the call to prayer in it, the Muslim call to prayer. And I don't think he realised, and then all the police came in and shut down the club, and then he was sort of like bundled out of there, but he's still got a suspended charge against him, I think, or he
No
did.
shit. All right.
Yeah,
I
because
did
it's
not
illegal to
know about
play
that.
it outside of a mosque.
Right. Yeah, that happened to this Palestinian DJ. What was it in Syria back in?
Yeah, the one the woman she's just been
Exactly.
in prison, hasn't she? Yeah.
Exactly. Something similar to that happened to her, but I think it was a Beatport event, but they had like the authorization by the government to do the event. I don't know. Uh,
Yeah,
all right.
but it was like big. It was big news, wasn't it? sort of amongst the community when it happened, and it just so happened that he was meant to be playing at Printworks a couple of weeks after, but they cancelled all his gigs because he was getting death threats and stuff on social media.
What the fuck?
They didn't want to risk him playing. Like it was crazy.
All right.
So he didn't play, but he played. Ben Klopp played, and I think Rodad maybe played.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was cool, and it was good, and it was a different experience. But yeah, I mean, for someone coming from the north of England and not having any experience of that, you know, it's different. But since then, you know, I've been to Berlin, I've been to Griezmühl, and it's just a very, very different way of partying.
All right. So yeah, it's good that you mentioned that. So you've been to Berlin. Like, how would you say, you know, the scene compares to the UK scene?
I think my own experience of Germany is Berlin. It's just a lot more serious and
German.
I don't know. It is. I mean, that's all you can say. It's just a lot more German. Like it's a lot more about having the look and having the right moves and knowing the music and just being very, very focused on the music and, you know, all the like the big movements. Whereas if you were to go to like a rave in the UK, it's just everyone just going with that. It's a lot more like fist pumping and stuff. And, yeah, I think that's probably changing, but yeah, I don't know. It is just a very, very different experience. But people in Germany seem to take it a lot more seriously, whereas in the UK, quite often, there's a lot more humour in a night out. Like it's often about, you know, getting really fucked and
going out with the boys.
Yeah, part of that. But you know, like if I'm out in the UK, I might spend half of my night in a smoking area chatting shit to people, and you know, I think it's a different culture because the smoking area culture isn't so much of a thing in Germany and Holland because they don't have smoking areas. Like we went to Basis in Utrecht when we were traveling around Europe last year, and there's no escape from the heat or the smoke or anything because the smoking area is just another room which is inside.
Yeah.
There's just no escape from it, and it's just I found it very, very intense and at points like not enjoyable at all.
Right. But like Trezor,
I think that's probably just because I'm used to being able to go outside and get fresh air, and it was the same when we went to Gashuda as well. There's just no escape from it, and it's just this massive cauldron of heat. And even when you go into the smoking area, then everyone's smoking as well. So there's just no escape, and there's no chance to like catch your breath and like get ready, and then you'll go back in, and then you'll do another like hour stint or something, which is what it would be like in the UK if you go to Warehouse Project. You know, you'll go in, you'll do an hour, like getting stuck into it for an hour, and then you go out and chill for a bit, and then go back in.
Right.
I think that's the difference.
Yeah, no, I think one of the main differences is how the scene developed in each country. Like in Berlin, for instance, the scene, well, the techno scene was basically triggered by the fall of the wall. There was basically no regulations, like an extremely liberal policy towards, you know, partying and stuff like that. And clubs like Griesmühle or Tresor and stuff like that, they were basically, you know, abandoned warehouses, you know, Soviet warehouses or whatever. And it was also a movement that was very inclusive towards minorities and stuff like that. So maybe, you know, maybe I'm not an expert or anything like that, but I'd say that probably, you know, had a big impact on the scene, you know, like wearing leather and doing these stuff like that.
I mean, don't get me wrong, like I'm not against that. I enjoyed it. I mean, the night that we had at Griesmühle was easily one of the best nights I've ever had.
When was it?
2019. We saw Refate play, and then I saw JKS and Mail go back to back, and I think Tham was playing as well.
Right.
Maybe Engajensu. So I think it was probably an Isthmus night, although I didn't really know of Isthmus then.
Right.
that was the second time. We were traveling around Europe, so we went through Holland and we went to Basis, and I saw JKS there, and then we came to Berlin, and then we saw him again. So I sort of followed him around on that like tour. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not against it. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the intensity of it as well. And you don't really get broken from the intensity of it, like, because there's no need to sort of go outside or move to different rooms or anything. The intensity stays, and because people tend to do longer sets as well, and I think there's a lot more freedom to play that sort of music in those places. And what you need in that sort of music is you need people to be locked in. Like, there's nothing worse than me playing 145 BPM industrial techno and people are stood around talking and like not involved in it. You need people to be involved in it and using the energy of the music and whatever for themselves. So I really enjoyed that, but it is very, very different from UK clubbing.
Yeah, no.
But it's changing, and you know, as the techno scene develops, you know, you go somewhere like Jay did in London, and you wouldn't know that you were in the UK. It's the same sort of culture and idea, and I suppose that's where London's different, because it's a much more multicultural hub of people. There's a lot more German people, Italian people living there, whereas in the north, you know, you've got different communities, but you know, if you go to a club, it's predominantly white, especially for techno. Maybe for house and stuff, it's a little bit more diverse, but that's probably one of the problems with the techno community in the UK, is that it's, you know, it's dominated by white men.
Oh yeah, no, that's definitely an issue. But that's everywhere, I think. Like, if you just check the quotas, like the women quotas, booked women artists quotas, in festivals, it's like 5% everywhere. Like everywhere in Europe. Like, I think it's even worse in the US, but like in Europe, it's crazy. It's
I mean, what's interesting is that you know, the area, the genre that I'm involved in, like hard techno, industrial techno, there's a lot of powerful women. I would say the higher part of the spectrum in terms of DJs and producers is dominated by women at the moment, which is really amazing to see. Like people like Rebekah, SPF DJ, BTSS, Clara Curve, people like that who are really, really doing really well. So it's interesting how in that subgenre of techno, like Amelie Lens and stuff, the women are doing really, really well. And I saw a thing online that was talking about maybe it's because it's a much harder style of music and you don't get that interpretation from men, that the only reason they've got there is because they're pretty or they're good looking. And that's an excuse that a lot of men use to justify why these women have got to where they've got to. But in reality, you know, it's because they're talented people. They're more ready to accept it because it's a harder type of music. And so, unfortunately, maybe that's why they've been pushed towards that sort of extreme type of music. But they've made it their own, and you know, they're the dominant force in the genre at the moment.
100%. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, but that is quite true. Who else do you have, like new school, like in that, you know, kind of wave, like Hector Oaks, Someone, but like the bigger artists, as you said, like SPF DJ, VTSS, Clara Couve, yeah, no, like I was talking to this girl, Lucine from Voxnox, actually, and we were talking about the women quota in festivals, as I said, and I think it's more like a problem with the underground, rather than, you know, with these quite established artists.
It is.
We're talking about like for instance the Fusion Festival in Berlin. Exactly. That's an underground festival, or like the artists are mainly underground. Like, you're not gonna have Dax J DJing there, or people like that. And it's quite amazing why booking agents, and unexplainable really why booking agents wouldn't book more women, because it doesn't always, you know, make sense to introduce a compulsory quota for women or
Yeah.
anything like that. The sound isn't there or stuff like that, but it's just exaggeratedly low. You know, the
I mean, maybe that's the problem, is that because the diversity is such a massive issue, any female DJ or artist who comes onto the scene, they're pushed um, to the front of the queue quite quickly, because there's an inherent felt need to make sure that the female artists are being seen to sort of meet their quotas. So then you've got the situation where, you know, if you had SPF DJ, BTSS, Rebekah, and Clara Quirv all on a lineup, you know, I'd like to see the promoter who could afford that lineup, because you're talking probably 5-6 grand for each of them. And then the problem is that you haven't got mid-range and low-range in terms of exposure DJs who are female who are coming up. So that's part of the problem, I think. I mean, that was one of the things when I started Khazad, is that what I wanted to do is try and push forward as many female producers and DJs as I could. And that was always one of my big things at the start, is that I wanted to try and have a reasonably even split. But I've seen it, you know, that we've got an artist called Grace Dahl. She already had a couple of releases, I think, but she really started with us at Khazad and did a VA, and then that VA track was picked up Amelie Lens. Amelie Lens played it in a live stream, and now she's released on Exhale, of Amelie Lens's label. But now I can see that she's gonna go up so quickly that it will be unaffordable for mid-range promoters to book her. So I think that's part of the problem, is there just isn't that depth of female artists throughout the whole spectrum of different levels. But I mean, it should change. I would have thought it will change, because, you know, if you've got all these high-profile female DJs, you would hope that it will influence more girls to get involved in it. And hopefully it will change. And, you know, I'm all for it, because the less masculine and masculine dominated you make these environments, and the more you embrace sort of queer and camp nights and stuff, it's just going to make it a whole more enjoyable experience than 200 white men dancing around together. You know, it makes it different.
100%, man, 100%. All right, man. So I think this is a very nice way to end the interview. Unless you want to talk about something else, that'd be basically all the questions on my side.
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's anything else to cover. No, I'm good.
I think we covered pretty interesting topics, man. So I just want to thank you, man. Appreciate you, brother. And anything you want, any projects you've got coming out that you want to announce or anything like that?
I'm going to be part of a VA on Moments in Time, which is a label run by Redosa out of Manchester. So that's coming up soon, which will be my first vinyl release. So I'm pretty excited about that. And then there's going to be an album as well on Instruments of Discipline, which at the moment was postponed because of Corona. So I'm hoping that will become this year, hopefully on vinyl, but we don't know. There's been so many issues with vinyl at the moment. And then also on vinyl, we're doing our first vinyl release on Khazad, which will be a VA of different collaborations. So it'll be me and Grace Dahl, Aiton there, Tim Williams and Tara Division, and then Caravel and Dion. So some really cool like mixes, really nice tracks. Like that's one of the things I want to push forward at the moment, is people doing different collaborations with different people,
right,
and just creating some really new and different sounds. So hopefully that will be June, July time. And then there'll be some summer stuff in there, but we can't say much about that yet.
Right. Looking forward to hearing that shit, man. 100%. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening. This has been Balrog, Neo Rave Rebellion, PDR 031, the Darkness EP, out now everywhere. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Peace out.